Hello and welcome to another edition of the Real-Time Fantasy Sports Show. I'm Jeff Power, senior writer with Real-Time Fantasy Sports, and I'm joined once again by Logan Glaser of RT Sports. Logan, thanks for coming on the show with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Exciting week of playoff football last week. Couple blowouts,
Yeah,
couple close games.
yeah, the games weren't the best, unfortunately. We had a couple blowouts, one close game, but for the most part, they were kind of out of hand. But there were a lot of fantasy points, which was good because we had some big performances, so that was exciting for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. So this week on this week's show, we are going to go over all the games. We are going to give you some of our favorite plays and one of our least favorite plays from the games. You can use that however you'd like. So if you're setting your lineup this week and for fantasy purposes, for your playoff contest, you can use it that way. Or if you're doing DFS or Pick'em on our site, we have DFS, great DFS games, or Pick'em contest as well. So you can use it that way as well. So if we're talking about a cold play and you want to look at the yardage numbers for Pick'em, you can use that to your advantage as well and maybe go under for the yardage for those or touchdown totals, whatever you'd like. So take advantage of that. If you want to get any of our DFS games, go to rtsports.com and then click on that DFS lobby. Is that what it's daily lobby? I'm sorry. That's what it says
Yeah,
at the
under that
top of the
daily.
click on that. You can get in DFS games. You can get in our Pick'em contest as well. You want to talk about those at all, Logan, our DFS and Pick'em at
Yeah,
all, and
for
let
sure.
people
So
know
yeah,
how
with
to.
Pick'em, new feature that was recently just added as well is with WagerWire, you can buy and sell DFS plays. So if you go under that Pick'em tab, you can click the option where it says buy plays, and then users will be posting and can sell plays to kind of hedge out where they currently are at and take some money instead of needing all 6 plays to hit for that $40 or 40 times payout. You can kind of hedge with that by selling your plays. So that's definitely a cool feature. Had a lot of interest last week. Lots of plays that were sold on there. And then under our daily tab, DFS plays or DFS. That's your normal daily fantasy sports where you can do drafts or you can do salary cap, compete against a couple hundred people, win thousands of dollars in prizes there.
Yeah, for sure. Take advantage of that. If you've never done it before, sign up. And for one of those contests, rtsports.com, click on that daily lobby and see everything we have to offer there. So, Logan, we wanted to also talk about our wire postseason shootout contest. So, we did an in-depth preview last week. We had the guys on from WagerWire, talked about players we're picking, how we would set our lineups. It's a $100,000 grand prize, just an awesome contest. But we thought it would be fun to bring up some of the numbers from this past week and talk about what went down. Unfortunately, Cowboys lost. That was a big upset, and I'm assuming most teams had 2 Cowboys on their roster. So if you're not familiar, it's 10 players. You have to pick no more than 2 players from each team. Your line stuck for the entire contest. So give us some numbers that you found kind of
Yeah, as
interesting.
you mentioned, Cowboys were definitely the most popular team in the entire contest. CD Lamb was actually the most owned player, even higher owned than McCaffrey. Lamb came in at
Surprising me.
87%. Yeah, definitely surprises me as well. I guess people are factoring that McCaffrey's taking a 0 that first week. Lamb will
Yep.
go out and get 20 points. And then with the chance that maybe Dallas does upset San Francisco, then you're getting 4 games out of Lamb. But that's the only thing that I can kind of think why you would go with Lamb over McCaffrey there. But yeah, 87% owned was CD Lamb, 83% was McCaffrey. So a lot of teams took that huge hit with Lamb going out. And also Dak Prescott was the #1 QB owned in that contest as well at 51%. So a big double hit there. And then we also had a decent amount of Rams players that got knocked out. Nakua was 30% owned. He did put up 30 plus fantasy points, so he did at least provide a really solid week 1 with that. A couple of Cleveland players that got knocked out. Jerome Ford and Amari Cooper, and then Miami, you had a Chain, Tyreek Hill, a couple people had Waddle as well. So with teams that are still alive in this contest, 10 out of 10, they have a full roster. No one's been eliminated. Only 0.8 teams have 10 out of 10 players still
Wow.
alive.
Point
9 out
eight.
of 10 is sitting at 1%. So 2% total makes up 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, which is pretty incredible. The median is at 6 out of 10 owned. 6 out of 10 has 32% owned, and below that makes up 50%. So over half the teams have 6 players or less, which is pretty remarkable after 1 week. That just shows how many people did have that 2 team with Dallas involved.
Yeah, so I would think if you're one of those 0.8% of teams that are 10 of 10, you're looking pretty good at this
Yeah.
point because you're going to have a huge advantage this week at least. I mean, you may get players knocked out this week, but still, for this week, if you can rack up, 40, 50 points from those players that those other teams have, that's a big advantage.
Yep, absolutely. And most likely teams that are having like 6 and 7 players that are currently on their roster, they most likely had like Dak, who went out and put up 30 points. So they might be way ahead in the rankings, and you're sitting down around 1,000, maybe even near the bottom with a 10 out of 10, just because you had those players on a bye last week. I think you're definitely going to be shooting up the leaderboard this week and future weeks to come.
That's true too. I wonder how many people, I don't know if you have the numbers, so I'm putting you on the spot, but maybe had that CJ Stroud stack. Did many people have that?
Let's
Because
see.
I would think that's a pretty good stack that maybe differentiated itself a little bit from other teams. Maybe
Yeah,
some
CJ,
Texans.
let's see, 1.8. So 1.8% had that stack between CJ
Okay.
Stroud and Nico Collins.
So they get
So
one more game this week. I don't like their chances too much to beat the Ravens, but
yeah, still, I mean, to get 2 games out of that stack, that kind of
yeah,
it's not bad.
yeah.
You'll definitely take that. If
not-
somehow they do upset Baltimore, then you're looking really good with that stack.
I think those people that had the Lions, a stack with them is looking pretty good, or the Bills as well, because they could get 3 games. So, I mean, the Lions one's another one that I think a lot of people were scared to pick them because they thought they could lose last week, but now they got a home game this week after winning last week against Tampa. It was the worst record of any team remaining in the playoffs. So, I mean, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, even Sam Laporta, who I'm guessing many people didn't take because they're worried about his injury, but he scored a touchdown. So that's another team that could end up helping somebody win this postseason shootout.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Detroit is the team just because I think with Buffalo and Kansas City, I do think that game's going to kind of be a toss up, whereas Detroit is looking at a more for sure win against Tampa with that 6-point spread. But yeah, Amon St. Brown, I believe he was the second owned wide receiver. Let me confirm that. Third owned wide receiver at 39%. Second owned wide receiver is
Really?
actually Debo Samuel, is the second most owned wide receiver.
I'm kind of surprised Amon-Ra's that high. Interesting. I would think
Yeah.
people would have been a little more scared of him. Some good data there. I like that. We'll have to go over it again next week. On next week's show, we'll talk about this postseason shootout and the leaderboard. Maybe we'll get into the leaders as well and post that on there and let everybody see who's winning. Give them their due for being ahead after 2 weeks and go a little more in depth there. But a lot of fun to talk about that. Again, great contest. $100,000 wager wire postseason shootout. Just a ton of fun. If you didn't do it this year, I really think about doing it next year because it's an awesome contest.
Absolutely.
All right, Logan, you want to get into these games now? So we're going to give you our thoughts on the games. We're going to talk about the spread, the over-under, and then give you a player we like and a player we don't like. First one on the slate is Houston at Baltimore. Baltimore is the number 1 seed, 9.5-point favorite, 43.5 for the over-under. So that's not a huge number. Let's talk about that first. Are you going with Houston to cover that, or do you think that Baltimore can, put up 10 plus points in victory here,
So
or
I
win
think
by
I'm going
10
to go
points?
with Baltimore and the over. I think both of these offenses are capable of scoring with that 43 number. Also, Mark Andrews is a guy to kind of watch for this game. It's actually looking like he might play this week.
Yeah.
So that would be a huge addition for that offense. I feel bad for everyone that picked Isaiah Likely in overtime leagues because he was actually going pretty early in those overtime leagues. I still think he'll have a catch or two. He'll be more dependent this week. But I think when we get to like the conference finals and then the Super Bowl, if Baltimore does make it, then Mark Andrews will be there for sure, go-to guy. I think he might have his snap count a little bit in this game. But a guy I'm targeting in this will be Gus Edwards. He's very touchdown dependent. So that's what kind of is a little iffy on him. It all depends if he gets a touchdown, but he's had 12 touchdowns in his final 10 games. Keaton Mitchell is out for the season, who I thought was their best back. So Gus Edwards is going to get most of the workload. We've seen in recent weeks him get some carries. He had 16 carries in week 17, week 15 as well. Last week when they had that kind of clinched up, he still had 10 carries with that. They did sign Dalvin Cook, who might get a carry or two, but I don't expect anything more than that from Dalvin Cook on that. So I'm going to be targeting Gus Edwards in this game.
I agree with you on the Ravens pick, and I think they cover. I agree with that. I like the over as well. I could see Houston keeping close for like the first half. A lot of times that happens in these games where a team didn't play the first week like the Ravens. So the Houston coming off a big win, got some momentum going. So I could see them keeping this game close for a half, but I think the Ravens pull away, maybe win by 10, 13 points here. I think it's going to be a great learning experience for Houston, though, as they build towards the future. I mean, they have a bright future with a lot of great young players. Just see what they do in the offseason to help CJ Stroud and that offense. But, man, I'm excited about them. But for this week, I like the Ravens to win, cover. Like I said, Houston could keep it close for a while. And I really like Zay Flowers. You said Gus Edwards, which I think is a solid pick as well. But Flowers really had a breakout season. He's a top target receiver for the Ravens. He had really good numbers late in the season as well. 20-plus fantasy points, 3 of his last 5 games. His scores 4 of his last 5 games as well. He's getting it done on a weekly basis. I know he had that injury late in the year, but he was held out that last week of the season as a precaution. He's fine. He's already practicing in full this week. Texans also have allowed 265-plus passing yards 3 of their last 6 games. So I think they can be had through the air. I know their numbers have been decent defensively lately, but I think their matchups kind of played into that. It's a tough one this week against this high-powered Ravens offense. So let's talk about now a player we're kind of fading for this week, somebody you're scared of in this game.
Yeah, he's not going to be highly owned, but I'm going to be fading Dalton Schultz in this game. Just recently, he hasn't gotten as many looks as I would like for him to get in the offense. Last week against Cleveland, he only had 1 reception. He only had 2 targets, so he didn't get very many looks. It's all been Nico Collins really in that offense. That's been really the focal point with that. So I'm going to definitely be fading Schultz in this game.
And his other target, he actually had a drop. So that was
he sure did. He did make up for it because that 1 reception was a touchdown, but still, it's a little scary for me just because of his recent usage has just not been there. He hasn't gone over 43 yards in the last 3 weeks with that.
So I'm fading a Texan as well. Not a surprise, but mine's Devin Singletary. He's actually had a really good season, in my opinion. Emerged as a starter. He has scored straight games. He's been consistent, especially the second half of the year. But I don't like his matchup against the Ravens, a really good defense, 14th overall against the run, 4 rushing yards per game. I think Houston's going to need to rely on CJ Stroud in that passing game this week offensively. I don't see Singletary doing much in this matchup, unfortunately. So we had a question in the chat as well. You talked about Gus Edwards. I don't know if Ron was here for that, but is he a good play in a 1-and-1?
So I'm assuming 1 and done with that. So I would say yes. I mean, he's an okay play because I do think Baltimore is going to make the finals. So it's really, are you going to save McCaffrey for the finals?
It's true.
If you're saving McCaffrey for the finals, then I think Gus Edwards is an okay play with that. I don't know if he would be my favorite running back on the slate. Let me try to, maybe someone like Pacheco, I would almost go with him just because I think the Chiefs might lose. I think so. He might have a little bit more value right there. He's not a bad play. I would say that though.
I don't think he's. Again, I agree with you, Logan. I don't think he's a bad play. I just don't think his ceiling is really high because he doesn't catch any passes. He's a touchdown dependent player. If he scores, even if he scores 1 and he gets 80 rushing yards, that's not a great day. It's just okay. So I'm kind of like you. I might lean towards someone I think that's going to lose, like even a Rashad White. If you didn't use him the first week, I could see him having a good game against Detroit, which should be a high scoring game. So he might be a guy I look at. And you mentioned Pacheco too. I think that's another good play as well. I just think those guys a little higher ceiling. It's a good question. I think you could use them and get away with it, but I'm not sure it's my favorite play, especially since I think they win. So I think Logan and I agree there that it's an okay play, but we might consider other options. Logan, let's talk about the game on Saturday. It is Green Bay at San Francisco. Green Bay, the big upset last week, steamrolling the Dallas Cowboys. 50.5 for this over under. 49ers are favored by 9.5. And the Packers keep the magic going and shock the world and win this game.
So I say Green Bay covers, but I think San
Okay.
Francisco is still going to win. So I'm going to go with that as my selection on this. Green Bay played really good last week on both sides of the ball, both offensively and defensively. I think just because of the score line and how big of a lead they had is the reason why Dallas ended up scoring 32 points, just because that lead was so big. But that defense had they had a touchdown on the defensive side, and they really limited them in the first half. So a
They
lot
did.
of things to like about that defense, and that offense was just clicking every single time they touched the ball. It seemed like it was a touchdown. Aaron Jones, they just handed the ball to him, and he just went to work. 3 touchdowns for Aaron Jones. For the over and under at 50.5, it's the highest on the
That's
slate.
tough. Yeah,
It's
that's
tough.
tough.
Especially with it being again a playoff game with that, I think I might go the under just because that is a very high number. But both of these offenses have both been clicking, so it's kind of hard to fade San Francisco's offense, and Green Bay's also offense has been doing well, but I'm still going to go under just with that high of a number.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to be really close. I might go the over just because I think the Packers are going to be able to score some points in this matchup, but I'm not confident in it. So it's one I'm not really going to target when it comes to the weekend. So I'm going over, not confident. I actually think the 49ers cover too. That's another really close line. And I'm kind of feel like it's similar where I think the Packers are going to keep it close for half, and then the 49ers are going to pull away once they start clicking. But again, I'm not very confident in that pick. So that's what I'm going with there. Let's talk about who do you like in this matchup here? What player you think is going to have a good showing?
Yeah, player I'm going to target is going to be Debo Samuel. I think he is one of the hottest wide receivers right now. As I mentioned earlier, he is the second most owned player in our shootout, which is very surprising for me, but still, his numbers have backed it up over the last couple of weeks. Between weeks 12 and 15, he was incredible 22, 35, 34, 22. So he's put up some monster numbers. He does have 5 rushing touchdowns on the year too, along with 7 receiving touchdowns. So total of 12 touchdowns on the season with that 225 rush yards. So they've every single game since week 9, he's been getting at least a rush, and he's definitely made use of that. He had 4 games where he scored touchdowns since week 10 by the ground. So I think they get him involved. Again, as we mentioned, this is going to be a very high scoring game. So I want stars in this game as players that I'm going to be targeting.
So this is kind of a cop out, but I think Christian McCaffrey is going to have a huge game. I know he has a huge game every week, but I think Green Bay can be had on the ground, and I think Dallas kind of got away from that too early, in my opinion. They still had some big runs with Tony Pollard before they ended up getting blown out. But Green Bay's allowed 200 plus rushing yards 4 times this season. They're 28th overall against the run. I think the 49ers can run all over him. Even Debo Samuel, he'll get some chances to run the ball. Christian McCaffrey. So I think McCaffrey, this is my prediction, he's going to get over 200 plus total yards, and he's going to score 30 plus fantasy points. So I think he's going to have a huge game. I love him. I'm not worried about the calf injury. He's practicing in full. He should be. It was a minor strain. I think he's just going to have a huge, huge game here. Again, I know this is not going out on a limb, but I just think he's going to have a monster showing in
Yeah,
this one.
I totally agree. I think they're going to get him the ball every single time inside the 10, and there's going to be lots of high scoring. It's definitely going to be a high scoring game.
Yep. All right. Talk about a player we're fading now in the Packers 49ers game. Anybody you don't like in this matchup that could be really high scoring?
So I'm going to be fading the entire Green Bay wide receiver core. I think that they just have too many
Flip a
options to
coin.
trust
Flip a coin.
one. Yeah. So instead of
You don't
one,
know
I'm
who's going to.
fading. Uh, so they've got Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, Wicks. So I mean, those are four players that I think could go off, or they could have nothing. I think just one of them last week, they put up 48 points. Christian Watson had 9 yards. Jaden Reed had 0 yards. Wicks had 25 yards, and it was all Dobbs at 151 yards. So it's really hard to really trust one of these. And Dobbs is really only getting 3 or 4 receptions per game. Jaden Reed kind of leads that team in that wide receiver, and he had 0 touches on the ball. He had a couple targets, but he had 0 receptions. So again, I think all four of these wide receivers has the potential to go off, but it's hard for me to go trust one and put them in my lineup.
So it's funny you say that. I actually picked a receiver for my player I'm fading. It's Romeo Dobbs. It's
There you
Romeo
go. I
Dobbs.
mean, he's the one that did go off last week.
That's why I'm fading him, because I think they're going to focus on getting Reed the ball after last week. He was their best receiver all year. So if I had to pick one, it would be Reed. I think he'll get more targets this week. And like you said, Dobbs really only normally gets a handful of catches a game. He broke some big plays last week, which led to his big production, but I could see him fading this week and not doing much. I'd much rather try Reed. He'll probably be less started because of last week. So in whatever you're doing. So I'd go for Reed. I'd say Dobbs. That's my opinion. In that one, it's kind of funny. We both picked the Packers receivers there. All right, next game, which I think is going to be a really good game, even though it's a 6.5-point spread. I think it should be a fun, exciting game, and that is Tampa Bay at Detroit. Detroit coming off their first playoff win in forever. They're 6.5-point favorites. The over/under is 48.5. Bucs looked good last week, though, in my opinion. Baker was balling in that game. I know the Eagles are a complete mess, but what do you think happens here? 48.5
Yeah.
minus 6.5 for the Lions.
This is definitely probably, I think, both of these games on Sunday are going to be amazing to watch. I think both of them are
Agreed.
one-score games. So with this being what I anticipate to be a one-score game, I'm going to go with Tampa Bay at plus 6.5. I do still think Detroit does win, but I am going to go with Tampa as that pick. And at 48.5, I think I might go over. I think Detroit's offense is just really good, and their defense slacks. So I do think I can see both teams being well into the 20s and for this point total and going over on that. So
I totally agree. I agree with both. I'm going with the Bucs cover, and then I'm going with over as well. I think the Lions win, but the Bucs cover that 6.5 number. I think it'll be a close game. I like the over. I think there'll be a ton of points scored here. I don't like both defenses too much, especially their passing defense. Both these defenses against the pass have not been very good this year, so that worries me from a defensive standpoint. So I think there'll be some points scored, and I think it should be a great game, though. I'm really looking forward to this. So who's the player you like in this matchup, Logan?
yeah, targeting the top player on this would be Amon St. Brown, and that's exactly who I'm going to be targeting. So Tampa Bay is great against the rush, but they're ranked 25th against the pass. So I'm definitely going to be going with Amon St. Brown against Tampa Bay's secondary with that. So Amon's recent games, he's had 4 out of his last 5 have been, I mean, 5 out of his last 5 have been over 90 yards, couple in the hundreds, touchdowns in 4 of the last 5 with that. So he's just been 24, 28, 22, 27, 18. I think he has to be in every single person's lineup. I mean, I think this is a lock to be 20 plus fantasy points from him this week. I think Detroit's going to be rocking, and I think they get him the ball as much as they can.
I agree. I think he was a league winner in the playoffs, in the fantasy playoffs during the regular season, and he could be a league winner here as well. So I think he'll do well in this matchup. I like Sam Laporta a lot, but I'll give you a buck that I like as well. That's Baker Mayfield. Great opener. He hit the 300-yard mark in the playoffs opener last week, had 3 touchdowns as well. He has multiple touchdowns, 5 of 6 games. He has 3 touchdown games during that stretch as well. I think it's a high-scoring game. I think they're going to have to throw the ball to have success. I like him to keep it going this week. Detroit not been great against the year. They allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to quarterbacks during the regular season. I think Mayfield in this Bucs passing game has a good showing here, even in defeat. All right, Logan, talk about a player you're fading, somebody you don't like in this matchup.
Yeah, player I'm going to be fading is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. So as I mentioned, Tampa Bay is terrible against the pass, but they are amazing at defending the run. They rank 3rd against the run. Gibbs only had 12 touches last week. It seemed like in crucial situations they were relying on Montgomery. Montgomery had 14 rushes compared to Gibbs only 8. What saved Gibbs was he had 4 receptions for 43 yards. So that definitely saved him, and also the touchdown with that. But recently he's had 5, 9, and then 16 for his fantasy point total. So I think there are just a little bit better options, especially because I do think when the game's on the line, they really turned to Montgomery last week against the Rams.
So I actually picked the other Lions back to fade, but
It's
I think
hard
we're just
to
fading.
it's
We're
hard to
fading
put
both.
them both in just because with them
Yeah.
splitting carries and everything. So
Yeah, I don't like Montgomery. End zone last week, which has been his saving grace when it comes to fantasy numbers. He has scores 4 straight games, but he still hasn't topped 65 rushing yards in any of those games, and he has just 3 catches during that stretch. So when we talked about ceilings earlier in the show with Gus Edwards, it's kind of the same way with Montgomery, in my opinion, because he doesn't catch the ball, but he scores a lot. And I don't think he's going to score this week. The Bucs have allowed just 10 rushing touchdowns all season. They stopped the push last week. We saw it. Vita Vea in the middle,
we saw it.
blew it up. He's unbelievable in the middle of that line. So I worry about Montgomery scoring, so I don't think he's going to have a great fantasy showing. Bucs also allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points of running backs this year, 5th overall against a run. I just think the Lions are going to have to throw if they want to win. So that means, like you said, Amon-Ra St. Brown could have a big game. I like Sam Laporta too. I think he looked fine on his knee injury last week. He looked a little, less than 100%, but he still scored a touchdown. I think he'll be even healthier this week, and I like him as a good play as well. All right, Logan, game of the weekend, and it's the best one in my opinion. Kansas City at Buffalo. Both these teams won last week. Buffalo gets that home game because Kadarius Toney lined up off sides earlier this season, so that could be huge for the Chiefs, but I just think it's going to be a great game. -2.5 for the Bills. So usually it's implied 3. So maybe the Vegas thinks Chiefs are actually favored in this one, and it's 45.5 the over under. That's right in the middle. This is a tough one to pick.
It sure is, because we've seen both of these teams play really good this season, but we've also seen them both play really bad. So it just depends which team kind of shows up. We've seen great quarters from them in the playoffs and also terrible quarters. I mean, Buffalo was up 21-0 against Pittsburgh last week, and then next thing you know, Pittsburgh was within 7, and it's a 1-score game. And that's kind of what Buffalo has to eliminate. They need to play 4 good quarters to win this game. They definitely have the ability to win this game, and I am going to choose Buffalo, but it's really kind of which team is going to show up for Buffalo. I think if they trust their run game, they win this game. I think Kansas City just has too good of a pass defense. So I think they really need to turn towards James Cook and trust him on the ground.
What was that epic playoff game? Was that 2 years ago when it was crazy? The Buffalo
Yeah.
scored, right? Buffalo scored at the end of the game, and they were,
I mean, if you want a good YouTube video to watch the last 3 minutes of that game,
yeah, it
just
was
back and
unbelievable.
forth, and in 13 seconds you go down and kick a field goal.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going the over, even though these offenses haven't been great lately. I mean, Buffalo played good last week, but the offensively, so they've been a little more less explosive. But I think that's going to be a shootout, high scoring game. I like Buffalo to win too. I think they finally get over the hump, beat the Chiefs, and win the game and cover that 2.5. I could see it being like a 3-point game. So I'll take Buffalo there and give them the points too. So I like Buffalo. I like the over. Let's talk about a play you like in this matchup, Logan.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I really think Buffalo needs to trust the ground game, so I'm gonna go with James Cook as my play. Um, as someone mentioned several weeks ago, we keep bringing this up, but Kansas City allows the most receptions to running backs,
Yep.
and James Cook is very capable of getting receptions. So last week he had 4 receptions against Pittsburgh. So that definitely helps PPR points, but he's also going to be getting 15 plus carries on the ground, which is pretty crucial with that. What he lacks is his rushing touchdowns. He only has 2 rushing touchdowns. He's getting all this volume, but when they get inside the 5, it's either Josh Allen rushing it in or passing it in.
Yeah.
So that's
Josh
definitely
Allen,
something.
what's he have? 15 rushing touchdowns, something crazy like
Yeah,
that. I can't
just
remember.
crazy. So you got 15 from your quarterback and 2 from your running back. So put that together. But James Cook definitely still has the ability to go off. Week 15 against Dallas, he had 36. Last time he played Kansas City, he had 25 fantasy points. He had 5 receptions for 83 yards and a touchdown. So as we mentioned, right there with the reception. So I'm going to go with James Cook as my player to target in this game.
You could call James Cook the exact opposite of David Montgomery and Gus Edwards. He gets all the work on the ground, the passing game.
He sure does.
Those guys are a lot more. I mean, Montgomery's not quite as touchdown dependent. He's had pretty good numbers, but still, it's kind of crazy. All right. My favorite pick in this game, I'm going a deep dive here, kind of a sleeper. Khalil Shakir. I kind of like him with Gabe Davis. I don't think he's going to play again. That knee injury has sidelined him in practice all week again. He didn't play last week, but Shakir's been playing better. He has 12 plus fantasy points, 2 straight games. He had a fantastic touchdown catch last week. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. There's going to be more throws in this game for Buffalo, even with you saying that Cook's going to run more. I agree with that, but I just think there's going to be more offensive possessions, leading to more change for everybody involved. So I like Shakir a lot, and I know L'Jarius Sneed is probably going to know Stephon Diggs in this game, so that could be more favorable coverages for Shakir as well. So I like him in this matchup. I think he could have one of his better games of the season. How about a fade, Logan? Somebody you don't like?
Yeah, so I'm going to be fading Travis Kelsey with this game. So I thought last week they were just going to constantly get Kelsey the ball, and they did target him 10 times. But he had several different drops, crucial drops as well. Also, one that he could have scored on. He has not scored a touchdown since week 11 of the season, which is just crazy to me that he hasn't scored
Yeah,
in 8 games. With that, he had his postseason touchdown streak broken last weekend. So I do think I'm not going to be targeting him. Last week, Pacheco had 24 rush attempts. So as I mentioned, Buffalo going to ground. Kansas City also turned to the ground big time last week against Miami. Um, so that's going to be a guy I'm going to be fading. And it also is worth to note that this is going to be Mahomes' first away postseason game. Isn't that crazy to think? Isn't that
that
crazy?
is crazy. Holy cow. I never even
Yeah,
realized that.
first besides a neutral side for the Super Bowl, of course, but his first away postseason game. So I'm interested to see how he
Interesting.
does on the road in a playoff environment, especially at Buffalo, of all places.
So you just brought him up, and I'm actually fading him, and it's Patrick Mahomes. I never thought I would say that, but with the other options available this week, it just kind of scares me. His numbers have been really mediocre. They've been stalling in the red zone. He has just 1 touchdown each of his last 3 games. He just has not been great for fantasy owners. He's playing fine. The receivers just aren't very good. They just don't help him a lot. They don't make a lot of big plays outside of Rice and Kelsey slowing down. Buffalo's been better defensively down the stretch as well. They've allowed the 6th fewest fantasy points of quarterbacks during the regular season. So I think Mahomes could have another mediocre showing. I don't think it'll be terrible, but I'm just not expecting a monster game from him. Despite points being scored in this one, I could see Pacheco having a huge game. I like him a lot in this matchup.
Yeah,
All right,
looking at
Logan.
Mahomes right now, he hasn't had a good game since week 7,
Yeah,
which is crazy. A
crazy.
lot of points in the teens, between 14 and 19 has really been where Mahomes has been.
Butker's been amazing for fantasy teams down the stretch here. He's
Yeah,
had a ton of points
sure
because they
has.
keep stalling in the red zone. Yeah. So, Logan, that's our preview of all 4 of the games this weekend. The divisional round should be a lot of fun. Let's hope they're close. this week for
Yeah,
sure.
it should be, and a lot of, probably high-scoring games. I mean, the lowest over/under is 43.5, so lots of points to be scored this weekend.
And we both thought that was low. We think it's going to go over.
Yeah.
So, like you said, could be a lot of fantasy points this week. Games on Saturday and Sunday, not Monday. No Monday night games. 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. Get those lineups in before Saturday for sure. Don't forget about that. Also, don't forget about our Pick'em and our DFS contest on RealTime Fantasy Sports, rtsports.com. Go under that daily tab and click on the lobby. You can see everything we have to offer, especially our wager wire offerings as well. Logan, now at this point, we're teamed up with them. Talk about that again real quick. How can owners take advantage of that?
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, so under our daily tab, click on Pick'em, and right at that Pick'em page, there's gonna be an option to buy plays. If you click on that, it's gonna pop up with the wager wire. You're already logged in on RT Sports. Everything is done through RT Sports, but you just see those offerings on wager wire where you can go in and select plays that have already been used by other users, but they kind of just want to hedge out of their pick with that. So there's definitely great deals with that, kind of even enhanced payouts compared to if you just went through and selected those players. So definitely look at that. Very popular last weekend.
Yeah, we're really excited about teaming up with the guys from Wager Wire, and it's going to end up going into our fantasy contest as well. We haven't quite have that all set up, but that should be fun also. But it should be a great partnership. Again, they're sponsoring $100,000 postseason shootout, which we talked about earlier in the show, and we'll talk about it next week as well. And good to have some interaction with the viewers out there. We appreciate everybody watching. Good luck in all of your fantasy contests this weekend. And thanks again, Logan, for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jeff.
All right. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another RT Sports show on the Better Sports Network. And thanks for playing all your games here at RealTime Feature Business. And good luck this weekend. This has been Jeff Paur with RealTime Fantasy Sports.